We are now live. Welcome everyone to this session, all about developing effective performance reviews. I can't wait to actually sit back and listen to this wonderful panel hosted by Damien Andreasen from HiBob. Now, around the room, who we have are some fabulous people. We've got Charlotte, who's the head of people and culture at Headbox. We've got Caley, not Kaylee, people and culture manager LOD. Elise, the Chief People Officer at Prosper, and of course, Damien, over to you as our HiBob host. Before I pass it to Damien, I just wanted to quickly let you know the theme of today comes off the back of a fantastic report. I've actually put in the details myself to get that download. And one of the sessions that we're having today, we're going to have a few of them, but I'm going to send a link shortly. If you're wanting to see that report yourselves, please go and put in your details and you'll be able to get the insights and intel, all to do with the HR market, the must-haves, the must-sees, if you like. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to you, Damien.
Thank you, Jo. So good to be back doing another Striven webinar. We love these series, and this is the first in our second set of series with Striven, so there'll be more to come, which is a great thing to kick off again. But today we're talking about developing effective performance reviews, specifically for a hybrid workforce. And there's no doubt that with changes to the workplace over the past few years, has been one of those areas that we've had to really think about adapting so that they become more and more effective in the new kind of world of work, if you will. So we've got some great speakers today. Thank you all for joining me. Let's dive right in. And I think, that's really the starting point here is managing employee performance and productivity. It's probably changed pretty considerably since we've walked into this hybrid way of working, right? People everywhere, a couple of days in the office, not always. Maybe, there's policies that allow people to work overseas for a while. There's all sorts of new ways of working that have probably had a little bit of an impact on both the productivity of the teams and how we measure it and how that rolls up into the performance reviews and we think about them. So I just wanted to take a minute to go around and get a bit of an insight in terms of what have been some of the biggest challenges that you've faced over the past few years in this new environment to running really effective performance reviews. I might start with you, if that's all right, Caley, and get your insights on, some of the changes and challenges that you've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Damien. I think, and I speak on behalf of my esteemed colleagues on this webinar as well, we were discussing this just the other day, performance cycles. What does that even mean now in the new world of work? It used to have such rigorous boundaries around it as far as you're doing your half-yearly review, maybe linked to pay increases, bonuses, etc. Managers potentially scrambling for more and more detail at the end of the year, remembering that's something they need to do for their employees. We completely see, and I specifically have seen a complete and utter shift. So not only have the performance cycles evolved, but the content behind them has evolved and what we're asking our people leaders to do now. And again, we were discussing this, Elise and Charlotte, the other day, that real holistic people management role now. Not only are you looking at the day-to-day operational requirements of your team, but you're looking at, you've got an insight into their world now. You can see my bookshelf, you can see my beautiful plant I'm trying to keep alive. You actually can see a lot of the things that we couldn't see before when it comes to our people. So these managers have that duty of care as well, people's mental health. We're thinking about how people are using their time and working more effectively, perhaps not in that 9 to 5 old school mentality. So performance reviews now, not only are they a lot different in how cyclical they are, but what we're expecting our people leaders to do as well is not only that day to day, but also we need them to be the first point of call for our people for all of those other aspects of life too.
Yeah, some really great points. And we're going to dig into a few of those in a bit more detail in a minute. So I'm glad you brought a few of them up. Elise, how about you? How have things changed over at Prosper?
Yeah, I agree with Caley. We've seen our leaders have to balance care and accountability. And COVID saw us dial up care big time and start to have mental health conversations, wellbeing conversations, and people start to get comfortable with those really personal conversations. Now we've seen with the economic landscape changing, a lot of businesses are focusing on productivity. There's a lot of pressure on performance. Now we're seeing accountability being dialed up and effectiveness being dialed up. So I think we're trying to get the balance right between care and accountability. It's not easy. It's not easy for our leaders to get that balance right either. So I have a lot of empathy for leaders right now. I think it's a really challenging environment to navigate. But I think the other piece we've had to navigate through hybrid ways of working is just making sure we've got the right tools and technology in place. So we've got, a distributed workforce. We are working in the office a couple of days a week for collaboration, and then the remainder of the time is in a different remote location for focus work. So how do you make sure you stay connected? How do you make sure you've got visibility? You're aligned with your team, you're connected with your team, you're working on the right things. So I think really recalibrating the tools and technology is the other thing that I've seen a lot of businesses invest in, and that's something that we've invested in very heavily as well at Prosper.
Yeah, amazing. And Charlotte, how about HiBob? I'll shift the question for us slightly. So maybe some of the challenges and also some of the biggest changes that you've made over the past few years in terms of running those performance cycles.
Yeah, and just to go back to the point that you've already made, Caley and Elise, the changes that we've made and the challenges that we've seen have tied in massively with just employee well-being as a topic generally. So for the better part, leaders with line management responsibilities have had to balance performance expectations with employees' mental and physical health. And we've definitely seen, and I'm sure you agree as well, is that in a post-pandemic climate, that comes with increased levels of stress and uncertainty. Think about, for instance, how managers are tasked to deal with employees who suffer from higher anxiety levels, have concerns about health, have concerns about job security, and general changes in the work routine. And the problem that we've seen and that we face is that topic, employee well-being, has really evolved overnight, basically. And the majority of organizations, our organization at least, wasn't accurately equipped, or they didn't even actually initially have the resources in place to, invest in well-being programs or employee assistance systems. So there's been a big shift there. And what's also been slightly problematic is that our managers and our leaders were expected to play a crucial role in supporting employees' well-being, when in fact they themselves weren't equipped to, or they haven't learned yet how to sort of deal with such topics. So a lot of the changes that we've been implementing is just around the learning and development piece, making sure that our managers were well equipped and had the resources to manage those conversations with their employees effectively.
Yeah, amazing. And there seems to be a bit of a theme that each of you is talking about here. And there's this really, it's not a new theme, but it's certainly an ongoing one of well-being. And really interestingly, I think if you flash back 20 years ago and we were talking about performance reviews, well-being would not have been uttered in the same sentence as performance, right? It would be more about output and productivity and, what is the efficiency scores of our workforce. And now we're measuring it in, engagement and well-being, and these very, very different views of like what performance entails. And I guess just to kind of come back to the change that we've all seen within that theme, how do you balance the expectations of performance with the business when they want to see, typically I would say, productivity and output as those measures? How do you balance that performance review on the traditional axis with the new kind of capability of well-being for the employee as well? How do you balance those two and then package it into a performance review process? Because that feels challenging.
Yeah, I'll speak quickly to LOD. We have our ways of working, which are our values, essentially, that underpin everything that we do. So we've seen a huge shift in the way that we're using the performance review cycle, those monthly one-on-ones, weekly one-on-ones. We're actually utilizing our values to underpin a lot of the operational things that we do, as well as how we're concentrating on employee wellbeing. We have a lot of affinity groups within our LOD as well. So looking at our DE&I, we have a wellbeing group. Again, as you said, Damien, these things 10 years ago were not even factored in. They were sort of splinter groups that perhaps came on but did not ultimately have anything to do with the performance review of a person. But what I've seen particularly, I think, over the last 12 months at LOD specifically is and Elise and Charlotte both touched on this in different ways, but giving managers the tools and helping them understand and empowering them to have those conversations with people, because as you said, Charlotte, it's not natural for them either. As a people leader, we can't just assume that they understand how to manage people from an empathetic way as well as an operational day-to-day climate way. So, you know, it's all about how we underpin our values, and then we talk about that well-being on top of those. And again, giving managers the tools, I have found over the last 12 months, empowering them to do that, I've seen a huge shift. And it's now part of the natural conversation, which I think is a huge win. Again, 12 or 18 months ago, having these discussions and asking people to perhaps dig deep. Again, as you said, Charlotte, when they might be struggling as well as a people leader, so asking them to dig deep for their people as well as themselves. So again, I am filled with pride, and I'm filled with pride for our industry that it is something that we now talk about so generally, and it's part of our HR toolkit now.
Yeah, I agree with that. And we've also taken a step back. And when I think about kind of what's fundamentally changed, we have at Prosper intentionally had a look at what performance looks like for us. And for us, what we've said is it's intentionally about the what you're doing. So your objectives, your OKRs, KPIs, and the how you're doing. So you can't actually be achieving a required standard of performance unless you're living our values, demonstrating the behaviors that we see and believe in, as well as delivering in your role from a performance and an objectives perspective. So that's how we think we can scale our culture. It's also how we think we can have the right conversations with people over time. And I think collecting feedback is obviously going to be critical for us to make sure we're evaluating that effectively. So I think we're going to touch on that later on. But the other point that Caley made that I think is really important is performance management's not just one conversation or two conversations a year. For us, it's now an ongoing relationship. And those one-on-one meetings that we are seeing people have on a regular basis, whether that's weekly, fortnightly, monthly, they've actually been what we've doubled down on. And I'd probably go so far as to say, if you do nothing else as a manager, have really good quality one-on-ones. And they shouldn't just be a task list or a status update. Those things can be done asynchronously via Trello or different tools, but the one-on-ones are really about facilitating someone's progress, understanding where they're at from a well-being perspective, having a more holistic conversation. And we've also been very lucky to have a great tool and platform that helps leaders to navigate those one-on-ones. So it's actually a tool where people can go on and actually rate how they're feeling with their work relationships, with their well-being, with their impact. And that just triggers a really great conversation for a leader to go, hey, this is scoring a little lower this week. What's going on for you? Or I can see you're consistently high. What's working well that we need to double down and continue to invest in? So I think, again, the tools underpin those conversations, but it's fundamentally about ongoing relationship-driven conversations that start with care. And if you start with care, the results will take care of themselves. That's where we've got to start, right? If you don't create that psychological safety, if you're not investing in your relationships and people don't feel valued, heard, cared about, listened to, you're going to be pushing it up a hill when it comes to results and removing barriers. So I think that's sort of our philosophy, that we've really, really tried to work hard on those foundational one-on-one conversations. And it sounds really basic, but back to basics has kind of been our philosophy over the last few months, and will continue to be over the next probably 9 months at least.
I love that. And by the way, you can say the words culture amp. It's okay.
Excellent. Phew, I'm off the hook.
I was going to say, when do I get to talk about Bob? When do I get to spruik Bob? When are we getting to the Bob section of the webinar?
Elise, you know what is really interesting around that one-on-one? You know, in a previous role, the CPO there had set up a fantastic structure around one-on-ones, which, you know, it effectively meant that managers were not allowed to talk about progress to goals in one-on-ones. It was more of a check-in on the individual and how attached they felt to the goals, the business, their role. And it was really interesting. The manager had to guess their, you know, general engagement score out of 5 and the reasons why it might have gone up or down over the, you know, 2-week period. And then the employee kind of responds with where they are. And so it really made the managers think about the individual before the one-on-one. about what might be making them happy. And it was such a great way to build empathy and engagement into the role. And as you've kind of, really well articulated, that is a big precursor to how do you get the best out of people and drive performance overall. So
definitely. And that's a great point around preparation. Like if you can know ahead of time, rather than just run into a meeting, with 1,000 things on your mind, on your plate, unprepared. If you can co-create agendas in advance, if you can know how someone is feeling, you can mentally make sure you're going in with the right mindset as a leader, to know where they're going. So that's a great point, Damien, around preparation.
We really have
and add value. Yeah,
no, it's great. And this is a great segue into our next question, which is really about exactly this topic. Again, if we think traditionally, performance reviews once a year, as you said, Caley, it's attached to a REM cycle and everyone begrudgingly kind of goes through it. And, managers feel like they have to give their employees 1 or 2 areas to work on, even if they're superstars, just because that's how these reviews work. And I think those kind of times are changing. And, what I'd love to hear, and to the point of what Elise has made here, is like, how are you thinking, excuse the word holistically, horribly overused, but if you zoom out and you go, right, how do we actually review and manage and monitor performance throughout the entire year? Maybe each of you can share a little bit about how you're thinking about this on a bigger, more macro scale than just like, here's a performance review that we do once a year. And maybe, Caley, if you can lead us off with some of the things that you're doing, it'd be great.
Sure, absolutely. This is, again, I'm not just saying Bob just because you're here, Damien. We have very recently implemented Bob as our new HRIS, and I have to say, the tech in and of itself won't change your culture, nor will just having conversations with your managers. But if you believe in both of those things combining to make one incredible sphere, then you're really going to see some huge impacts, which we've already started seeing the last few months. So not only is Bob an incredibly easy platform to use, no, I don't work for Bob, nor am I getting paid any kind of commission for this advertisement, but it is a really easy platform to use. And due to the fact that you can actually schedule those weekly one-on-ones, there are templates that they have to, Elise, as you just said, having an agenda, have something specific to discuss. Remember that you should be talking 20% of the time when you are a leader. Your people should be speaking for most of the one-on-one. What are you doing in this one-on-one? What is actually happening? So the rigor that you can put around those structured meetings for people leaders not only assists them with what they need to talk about, but also structuring their time to make sure they're getting the best out of their people when we're speaking to them. And then looking at those monthly cycles that then add up to those 3 monthly cycles. So again, the tech in and of itself is an extension almost to the conversations that you're having to empower your leaders. And we're seeing a huge shift at LOD in regards to those kinds of cycles being actively recorded on Bob, and small wins as well. We haven't talked about, think about the traditional feedback. Yeah, thinking about just even peer-to-peer recognition, not sort of quarterly awards or half-yearly awards. I'm talking, Charlotte, thank you so much for helping me with that project, being able to give you a shout out, being able to put that on your file, in essence, on Bob, to be able to remind your manager in 6 months again when Damien, he's looking for something to say, oh, Charlotte needs to improve on this. No, she actually doesn't. She got incredible kudos for doing that project 6 months ago, and we have that documented here. So again, the combination of tech from a tool perspective, and then obviously those managers empowering them, and then us leading them to have those difficult discussions that may not be natural, I'm seeing a huge uplift in how confident they are to want to do it, and then the level of understanding as to why, which I think if we get the why right, we're going to succeed tenfold.
Agreed. I'm a big, I always call it internally my Simon Sinek. Everything I do, I always try and give context as to the why, right? And I think it's such a big component of getting people to buy in. But I really love the point you made there around tooling won't solve everything for you. It'll amplify what you're doing, right? And I think that's really the right way. It's got to be a marriage of process, intent, and then execution on the tooling side. And I always talk about we amplify things, we don't create. If you're looking to a tool to create your culture, you're not doing it the right way. It's a weird way to kind of think about it, but I have had those conversations. Charlotte, I'd love to hear from you as well. What are the ways in which maybe Headbox is thinking about broadening the way the company thinks about and reviews performance of its employees?
Yeah, I think in our company, because we're a sales organization, there's a much greater focus on results. So in the last couple of years, we've just seen a really great shift from measuring just employees' work based on hours spent in the office to focusing on outcomes and results. So, and that's been really important. I've actually given several training sessions on outcome-based performance metrics and really try to teach also as CEOs and just managers that it's so important to focus on that, because it allows employees to manage their time more autonomously, be more efficient, and take more ownership and be accountable for their results. So that's definitely been one huge topic that we focused on. And one of the changes that we've implemented, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of everyone here in this panel, but it's just being a lot clearer in our goal setting through OKRs. So our companies become a lot more explicit in defining clear, measurable, and achievable goals for all. And this has also become a really essential strategic piece, because those goals instill a sense of purpose and direction. And when employees understand what is expected of them and how they're contributing to the organization's objectives, they are in turn a lot more motivated, engaged, and focused on achieving those goals. So I think that that's been an important piece, but also just to go back to what we were discussing before with regards to performance cadence, that has changed a lot in our organization as well. So we've become a lot more diligent when it comes to giving regular performance feedback. So instead of just relying on the annual performance reviews, we've shifted towards providing more regular, timely feedback to employees via monthly check-ins, but also quarterly quarterly reviews. So for instance, doing, like I said, those monthly check-ins, but also just becoming giving a lot more constructive feedback in real time, on real-time basis. And I've seen that this has been a very important change that we've implemented, because it just allows employees to really understand their progress, areas in which they should improve, and also make those changes in real time. And on top of that, also allows employees to kind of recognize what achievements they've made and receive that recognition for the achievements that they've received in real time. And that's been a real morale boost as well, and has helped to reinforce good behavior. So yeah, that's in a nutshell are some of the changes we've made.
Yeah, amazing. I love the distinction you make as well, coming from a sales world. Performance is very easily measured as on or off track, right? But that's not the case for a lot of different roles within modern organizations. It's not as simple as that view. And the point that you made about having goals and then people really understanding their part in achieving those goals and the overall impact is a great point. Really good way to think about goals as well. Yeah, amazing. And I think there's also there's two sides to this coin, right? When you think about performance reviews, there's obviously the processes that companies put in place, the tools that they use, but then there's the feedback component, which is really manager specific and quite challenging, right? I think through my own career and many of the managers I know, I don't think any of us have ever been sat down and coached or trained on how to run performance reviews and how to do them effectively and give feedback in a way that's beneficial or is going to work for the employee. So really interested in maybe some of the ways that you're training your frontline leadership on how do they give feedback and how they do it effectively. And maybe Elise, you can jump in and give us a bit of a sense of what you're doing at Prosper.
Yeah, I think before I jump into feedback, I just want to echo what Charlotte said. I think that was such a great point around visibility and alignment of goals. And if people can see how their contribution counts to their department, to their organization, that sense of purpose is just accelerated even more. So we've also seen that, and the technology has just given us visibility over what's happening. So if you can kind of imagine a goal tree, it's all very visual and easy to see. So I can clearly see, all right, yeah, this is how I'm lining myself up. And we've actually tried something a little different, which is to have a high priority goal for every single employee to say, what is my absolute number one? So if we keep the main thing through the year, what would that look like? And it just helps to prioritize. We're a scale up. Prioritization is really messy and hard, and there's competing priorities and never enough resources. So if we can help people to know what is that number one? What am I working towards? And reshuffle other things, and then collaborate across the team to make sure you've got what you need for that number one. That's hopefully something that will help with that results-driven culture as well. So early days, but that's something that we're sort of experimenting with, that we think will hopefully help people with clarity, but also help people prioritize when things are getting a little tight.
Yeah, amazing.
But feedback, I think, is something we're equally passionate about, and we have actually done a little bit of training. So we have spent a bit of time on coaching our managers through, as Charlotte has, on, what are some great feedback models to use? How can you have the right conversations at the right time, making sure that it's not feedback that's saved up, that it's actually delivered just in time with a real coaching mindset and mentality. So we've kind of done that. We've also got an anytime feedback tool that we can use via Culture Amp that just means you can either give constructive or recognition feedback to someone, and that is then stored up for their manager to see, or for them to see as part of their development conversation or performance conversation as well. So that's been really helpful. But we are going to have to think more deeply about feedback, and particularly now that we've got a framework in place that requires people to evaluate against not only OKRs, but also behaviours and values. So we've actually asked everyone in the business will be asked this year to collect feedback from 3 stakeholders and to give feedback to 3 stakeholders. As well as complete a self-reflection, and also then your manager will complete a reflection on your performance and your behaviours as well. So essentially there's going to be 5 data points that are collected for each person to really inform how they've gone through the year, and overall what their performance assessment is. So that's for a couple of reasons. Hopefully it's more robust in terms of mitigating some of those biases that we really know exist. Proximity bias is a real watch out for us at the moment, obviously, because we are in a hybrid workplace and it's very easy to forget if you're not seeing someone every day. So that's something that is a big focus for us. So it's not only kind of the just-in-time feedback that we're looking to see, not just from leaders, but from all employees. It's actually a more structured, formal approach as well at the end of a performance period that we're asking culturally everyone to take a part in. So not only are you receiving, you're also actually going to be asked to provide feedback to at least 3 other people as well. So we'll see how that works. It's something we're still learning, and I'm sure we'll gather more data on as we go. But again, just building that feedback culture is something that I think is really, really important, and just making it part of the norm. So it's not a scary, awkward thing. It's actually just part of how we do business and how we do things at Prosper. So I think that is going to be a big shift that we need to kind of make.
I was actually going to ask you, Elise, and kudos on investing in training managers on how to give feedback, because I think it can be done really well or it can be done really badly. And I think when it's done badly, it actually has a way worse impact than what it's intended to. I think the other flip side, which you just touched on there, which is interesting, is like, how do you get all of your employees in a place where they expect and also enjoy getting feedback? Because not everyone likes getting feedback. Just ask my wife. That was really natural for everybody. So I don't know. That's an interesting piece as well. You're just baking it into, like, this is
we're just baking it into our process. So to your point, it's kind of not optional. It's at the end of the performance period, it's going to be, we actually need you to collect feedback from 3 people, do your own self-reflection, and also then your manager will do the reflection. So it's going to be a baseline minimum standard for us. And, I expect that we will get better over time. We'll build that capability up over time. But I kind of think sometimes consistency and just starting as you mean to go on, and then building capability is the way to go. So we've got the right tools and technology. Fortunately, we also had the appetite culturally. So we had people asking for this. This is not something that we were necessarily pushing out or even trying to influence really heavily. We fortunately had a business that and a culture where people care about development, they care about feedback. They know that if I'm growing and developing my own skills and mastery, that's going to contribute to my career, my team, my business. So fortunately, we have, I think that cultural sentiment was already existing, and we were able to kind of capitalize on that and really then just say, okay, we're hearing this appetite. It was actually from our technology and engineering business, which was fantastic to see, who are very focused on growth and capability development. So that was great. We were able to kind of take the existing appetite that we had and provide a solution and a tool that is hopefully going to be beneficial for the whole organization.
Feels like there's a bit of a thread there of like your values going back to your hiring, who you hire and do they align with your values? Because if you get that right, then actually they're the type of people who want the coaching.
100%. Yeah. And you're spot on. Like our values are not something that start when you start with us. We're actually talking about values even before you join. We're talking about values in the candidate process. We've got a culture code that really clearly sets out what it is like to work here, what kind of person we're looking for, what kind of person is not right for us. So people will hopefully opt in, and if they are interested in growing and developing and making an impact, we are the business for them. But we're not that for everybody. So I think it's been clear on.
Real transparency. You opt in or you don't, and that's like you're either excited by it, and then you know that they're the
or
right
you're put off by it. Yeah, and you can visibly see when you're interviewing someone if they kind of lean into those sorts of questions and they're excited by that, or they're actually really put off by it. And so that's I agree. It's a big part of our hiring and onboarding process. Yep.
Yeah, amazing. And what about LOD? What are you doing from a feedback perspective, or preparing your managers to provide or employees to receive feedback?
Yeah, it sounds like we're in a similar place to you, Elise. It's in its infancy in regards to how we're embedding it in our day-to-day and what we do. So again, the tech we have from a Bob perspective is excellent, and it gives the managers the tools to be able to do that. What I really want to touch on is this. It was the same, Elise, for us. Our managers are absolutely crying out for feedback. We have a huge appetite. We are not as data-driven as I would like us to be, but again, watch this space. I'll talk to you in a year when we have a robust year's worth of data. We not only have our managers wanting feedback, but we have our staff wanting feedback and wanting to provide feedback. So there's also that added layer of our staff would like to be able to do 360s on not only themselves, but on their managers to make sure that everybody is aligned and we're all striving for the same thing. So to me, that was the most, when I came to LOD, I thought people have a real desire to understand how they're moving forward in LOD, how they're going to integrate their skills into potentially either their next role or wherever it is they're going to go to, but also how is their manager doing? How are we doing with our people leaders? We've talked about this, Elise and Charlotte. Often people leaders are thrown into people leader roles, perhaps without being given some of the many, many tools that you need to be able to manage people. And it's really good for us, particularly in a very flat structure that we have at LOD, to be able to constantly make sure that we can provide feedback. So we have had raging success. Again, I think, Elise, same as you, in its infancy, people are really galvanized to be able to do that and to understand how that actually impacts them. As you said, Charlotte, it's the why. Why am I doing this? This looks amazing. This is my footprint in LOD. This is why I have this impact, and this is how that works. So we're incredibly good at giving recognition at LOD, always have been. We are incredibly good at spreading love. Regionally, we have offices in Perth, Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne. So again, we have a really broad workforce in Australia. The connectivity we have had through COVID was always recognition. It was showing people that you appreciated their time and that they did a great job. So now it's time to work on that constructive. And as you have all said, making it less scary, making it much more common to actually do embedded in day-to-day, so it just becomes part of the culture. So in a year, I'll come back with my entire data list and I will show you all of the incredible feedback that we've had through Bob.
Amazing. I love it. And Charlotte, how about from your side at Headbox? What's the way you're preparing your managers to provide feedback? And here's a bit of an interesting question I'd love to hear from all of you on as well. Is there a shift in the way that we're seeing, like you both talked about almost a demand for feedback. Is that split by generations, by role type, or is it just an expectation of the workforce now? Interested in that. And Charlotte, maybe you've got some views on that as well that you can share with us.
Yeah, so just to answer your first question, so the way that we prepare our managers for giving feedback is, first of all, just 360-degree feedback, and making sure that they've got full visibility over the achievements that their employees have achieved over that specific quarter. And yeah, that thereby really enabling to kind of provide constructive input on, their strengths, their weaknesses, skills, and competencies, and sort of areas that they should improve in. And I think that this is super important. It's an area that I think that's often overlooked because I think peers have much more sort of unique insights into each other's work because they've worked closely together before. And thereby, I think it also allows the manager to give a much better sort of more rounded perspective on an individual's performance as well as their contribution compared to when feedback is just given from the supervisor itself. So I think that's definitely an area that we put a lot of focus on. Secondly, the other way that we prepare our managers for giving feedback is via training. So one framework that we focused quite heavily on that we've given several training sessions on is the SBI framework. I'm sure you've probably heard from it already. It stands for Situation, Behavior, and Impact. So the reason why we decided to focus on this framework is because a lot of our managers are first-time managers. So they are put into a situation where they're having to give feedback to their direct reports, and they've never actually done that before. So we decided to come up with a framework that gives them a very clear-cut, sort of structured approach that is consistent as well in terms of how they have to deliver that kind of feedback. And that has been so important, and it's had a huge impact in teaching managers how to give effective feedback. And yeah, like I said, that consistency is super important because it just helps to create a more fair and respectful sort of workplace environment as well. And just to give you a little bit more insight into that as well, what I see that it has taught managers is that it has really empowered them to be a lot more specific about the situation in which a particular sort of behavior occurred that they want to discuss with their direct report. And that specificity has helped the employee to really understand the context clearly, thereby making the feedback in turn a lot more actionable as well. And I think by focusing on that specific behavior rather than making, generalizations of feedback, or it can sometimes come across as a personal attack. So the SBI framework really helps to keep the feedback super objective and factual. And that has helped to really encourage dialogue. It's helped to encourage two-way conversation, clarification of points, and also just the opportunity for employees to kind of express their perspective. So that framework has helped us a lot. So we've put a lot of focus on training our managers on that framework as well.
Yeah, it's a great framework. And Brene Brown says it best when she says, to be clear is to be kind, right?
Yeah.
Damien,
your point about the generational differences, that's an entire topic for another day. That's you've absolutely hit it on the head. And again, I don't think we have enough time to go into the specifics of it, but absolutely, yes, there is a clear generational difference in perhaps our younger Gen Zers coming through the workforce who are incredibly keen for feedback, whatever that looks like, and again, don't have the same perhaps thoughts on the word feedback that perhaps some of our other generations in the workforce do have. So again, happy to come on again next week to deep dive into the generational differences on giving and receiving feedback. But yes,
it's definitely different generational. Even I've seen it in my own roles. It's I see a lot of our younger staff wanting really regular feedback cycles on how are they performing. I feel like they're always building themselves an insurance plan for when performance review comes around. They know exactly what they're going to get.
Do you know what? They might have a point. They might have a really, really good point there. I like it.
It's a really good approach. Exactly.
Really good approach.
I think that just talks to the importance of a development culture and, you know, continuing to invest in learning and development is something that is really difficult when you're under pressure, and really difficult when you're under pressure to deliver really strong ROI on things. But it's the long game, and it's so important. And probably for most of us, we're seeing, I don't know, for us, we're seeing the large majority of our workforce are millennials now, by far. And that is putting pressure on us to make sure that we are bringing our A game when it comes to growth and development, and we're prioritizing it. And one of the lessons we've learned is we heard loud and clear in the feedback and the data from our people that they didn't have enough time to focus on growth and development. And so thought long and hard about how we're going to actually help this become more of a priority and give them the space to carve out to do this. And one thing that our team has experimented with is learning weeks. So actually taking a week twice a year to focus on not only your own development and building your own development plan out, but then also we run a series of masterclasses. So people across the business can actually come and present on topics that they're passionate about, have expertise in. And again, Charlotte, to your point about peer feedback, people love learning from their teammates. It was incredible to see the participation and the energy that we got from something as simple as putting, you know, a few masterclasses together and offering that to the whole business, and just giving people permission and time to focus on themselves and development. So that was something that has been a really great success for us at Prosper, off the back of, you know, some pretty confronting feedback about the fact that, yeah, we really want to focus on growth and development, but we don't have time. So that was a big problem we're still solving, but that was a strategy that really helped us to unlock that.
Maybe in hindsight to this conversation, the biggest forcing factor on how performance reviews are really being viewed in modern companies now is actually the generation of the workforce that most influences it, right? Like maybe it's not just the hybrid approach. It's actually more about the fact
what people want.
The power of the people. Power of the people. Yeah, the numbers speak. They do. Absolutely. Yep, agreed.
Yeah, great insights there. That's really amazing. The last question I've got, and we've touched on a little bit here, which is the all importance of like managers, your frontline managers, and you know, how are we really kind of setting them up for success in a lot of these conversations? I know we've touched on a little bit, but I think this is a topic that has been, you know, in doing this series a couple of times, and also in a lot of discussion with CPOs. You know, learning and development and coaching around frontline management has been a really big topic for the last almost 2 years. And I think, Charlotte, you touched on it. A lot of organizations have got first-time managers in, and they don't necessarily have management programs that have led them to this. And, you know, identifying key skills of what management is sometimes a little bit lacking. And, you know, sometimes the reason why we promote people into leadership roles is not for the right reasons. You know, traditionally, especially in sales environments, you know, the highest performer might get the sales manager role, but it meant that they had absolutely no empathy for their team. They just wanted to bill. You know, there's all sorts of stuff that we've seen in the past. So really interested in a little bit about like, what are some of the less, you know, what's worked and what's importantly as well as what's not worked when you've been preparing those managers for, you know, how to manage performance, how to also manage the wellness topics that we're talking about here as well. And Charlotte, I might just throw to you and see what your thoughts are on this.
Yeah, so in terms of what has worked is like just setting them up with the right type of systems and processes that they can sort of rely on. Like I said, a lot of our managers are first-time managers, so they have absolutely no idea to go about it. So it's almost like holding their hand in those early stages and making sure that they know exactly how to go about it, how the process starts, how it ends, and especially when it comes to the part about giving feedback, just giving them very, very clear guidance in that area. Another thing that we've recently implemented that has helped a lot is just recognition programs. Our managers have absolutely no idea in terms of how they should go about, you know, recognizing achievements, even though that is such an important part that should not be overlooked. So we've started giving a lot more frequent recognition and acknowledgement of employees' achievements through weekly shout outs and monthly and end of year awards. And I feel like the change that what has made this a bigger impact is the fact that this is just giving those kind of recognitions has become a lot more personalized and specific, and acknowledging not only the achievements, but also, what company values, behaviors, and skills that person has displayed that has led to their success, and just teaching our managers in terms of how important it is to kind of emphasize on those points has had a groundbreaking impact. So I think that that's one element that we focused on a lot as well. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question. That has worked great for us.
Yeah, for sure. I will quickly speak to LOD, and I was just thinking about, you said, Damien, some failures. I was thinking specifically, and it's always good to learn from these. I very much pre-COVID had perhaps a one-size-fits-all approach to people leaders, and thinking about when you're in HR or people in culture in any way, you think, if I have the right policies in place, if I have the right documentation in place, if I give you your manager toolkit, you will then know how to go forth and manage people. Good luck to you, and let me know if you have any questions. So I have done that in the past, and obviously to not much success, due to the fact that not only are they managing people who are different, but all of these people leaders are different. All of these managers are different. And Damien, you hit the nail on the head. What are the key skills of this person? Have they ever led a person before? Do they even know what that means? Here is a toolkit. What do they do with that? Elise, to your point about time, do they have the time to review these documents? What do they know how to do? So seeing that, giving people a toolkit and then wondering why perhaps things weren't going as well, or perhaps I was being reached out to a lot more by staff rather than managers, to then open my eyes to think, right, this isn't a one size fits all. Developing learning pathways specifically and bespoke for those managers was something that I was able to do to remedy that. Actually sitting down and having conversations, Charlotte, again, to your point, the feedback loop, the real feedback that you're doing a great job, this has really worked, this has done great for your team. So again, definitely the failures, or what we perceive as the failures to our people leaders, for me specifically, have taught me so much about now how to deal with people very much one-on-one. And as much as I love to empower my people leaders to do their job, and I send them off and I'm so proud of them for what they do, that is HR specific, I make sure that I'm always really, really close, and they know that I'm accessible and that my team are accessible if they ever need anyone to bounce anything off or to get that feedback from. So as much as I want them to be educated and out in the world, I really want them to come to me if they're feeling like anything might be a bit too difficult, and we can work on it together.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, that business partnership is so important, isn't it? Yeah. I guess I think they're great points made by everyone so far. I guess what I would add is it starts at the top. So for us, spending time as an executive team on what does our culture mean, what do our values look like in practice, how are we going to make sure as guardians of our culture we're going to really embed our values across the business. We're going to role model the right leadership standards that we then expect and hold others to. So we do spend a lot of time as an executive team on working on ourselves, and that's very intentional. And I'm super fortunate to have a CEO and an exec team who really does deeply care about culture and sees the value intrinsically. And the other piece I would say that we've learned is, apart from what I mentioned earlier around sort of some development insights that we learned that what was holding people back, the other thing that we heard was, that there was this leadership lottery. People were having different experiences with different leaders, depending on how capable they were, how experienced they were, what their natural preferences and approaches were. So we actually had to say, okay, how do we take a step back and really define what leadership looks like for us at Prosper? Because it is different in every single organization. Yes, there are some universal truths about leadership that we can adopt, but if you're truly wanting to scale your culture, then it's got to be about what does leadership look like for you here at Prosper. So we spent a lot of time, and we kind of said leadership for us is about creating the environment for success. And we identified 4 key pillars of leadership. And we then basically anchor every single leadership program we do from the very beginning. So when a leader is onboarded and inducted, to those 4 pillars. So we've got inspire and align, empower and deliver, grow and develop, and care and connect. And underneath those pillars, there are some more specifics about what does that mean? What does care and connect mean? What does that mean you need to do? Okay, you need to create a psychologically safe environment for your people. Well, how do I do that? So then we've basically built some resources, and there are different resources for different things to help people in delivering against each of those pillars. So whether that is how to have a feedback conversation, or whether that is how to actually get to know someone when they join your team, or how to have a strengths-based coaching conversation, we've then got some tools and resources to align behind each of those pillars. So it's I guess provided us a bit of a framework to say we've got clarity on what leadership means. We're asking people to think about where they're at against those pillars. You know, what areas are you naturally really strong in? What areas do you need to keep working on? For me, I know there's areas of our leadership framework that I'm working on myself at the moment, and there are areas that naturally I've got some preferences and strengths around. So I think it's just helped bring clarity to what leadership looks like, because it can be really overwhelming. And especially when a new leader joins a new company, they're just going to bring what they know. And that's very natural, unless you actually invest in developing and building up their capability and awareness to say, oh, okay, there's things I might need to adjust or adopt here that will make me be a really effective leader for this environment and for this culture. And I'm sure every new leader will also add things to our culture and improve and lift the bar for us as well. So that's something that's worked quite well for us.
I really love the framework of the pillars for leadership. It's not something I've seen very often, but also what it does for leaders to give them the psychological security to know that we don't expect you to come out fully formed. Like, you know, you know, as we are doing for the employees and talking about it's okay, we're going to develop you. Same goes for the leadership, right? Like,
that's right. Exactly.
Yeah. We're going to help you shape what, you know, the skills you need to be really effective in your role.
100%. And actually, from a people and culture perspective, it's really helpful when we're building programs. It just helps to make sure that it's intentional and focused, and we're not just doing busy work. It's like, is this going to move the dial on an area of our leadership pillar that we know is a gap for us, or we know is an issue? If it's not, why are we doing it? Let's have that conversation. It's been a really good kind of simple frame up for our team to think about where we can make the biggest impact and where the investment should be as well.
Great. Some really just amazing practical tips across this conversation. Unfortunately, we've blown through an hour so quickly. It's been fantastic. Really practical insights, some really applicable tooling, some way to think about leadership, how to think about performance, that it's an ongoing cycle, how to shape it against different nuances like the hybrid culture versus, you know, the generational forces that you find in your own workforce. Is just some really amazing insights. So thank you so much to all of you for participating and sharing with us all. It's been great.
So welcome. Thank you.
Joe, you're on mute. We need the old "you're on mute" t-shirt.
And there we are. Of course, it has to be.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. Yeah. I echo Damien's sentiments. What a wonderful session. I myself I'm just about to embark on performance reviews in my business. So I've taken a lot of gold nuggets from this, but there's even more gold nuggets to be taken. And that's from the actual report itself. I know as a HR leader, I always lean on my HR community. What's the latest thing to know? What's the latest tech to use? And so HiBob have done the hard work, and they've actually created a report from, 400 HR professionals across the Australian landscape? Because one of the questions that came up is, who's the demographic? So it's the Aussie shores that we're focusing on here. But the themes, I'm sure that we've come across, resonate with other locations, because there are some people from abroad as well in this session. So the report itself outlines how organizations are actually dealing with each of the major HR areas during this economic downturn or market shift, whatever you want to call it. So things like company culture, mental health, engaging and retaining talent. And I think performance reviews really go hand in glove with that. So much that you've given out of this session. So I just wanted to quickly let you know that report, there's a link that I will be sharing. But just to wrap up everything from today, the whole intent of having this kind of session, really, if you are a person in an organization and you're thinking about your job security and you're thinking about career growth, and I think structured performance reviews and having this kind of process actually allays your concerns, and it gives you a clearer vision of your future. And it does that if you're a HR leader for the people in your business. Unfortunately, however, only 49% of HR professionals say that their organization has a formal review process in place, which is why today I hope that everyone has walked away with saying to themselves, we have to have it embedded if we don't. So thank you so much to all of you for this session. It was so wonderful. One of the questions that did come up was regarding the feedback models, but I think it was actually answered. It was from Angelique. But Angelique, if you feel it wasn't answered, any one of these individuals here will be sure to be happy to answer the question. So any final comments from our panel? Any last little bit of advice for the audience?
No, I've learned so much. So thank you so much, Charlotte, Caley, and Damien. It's been a fun hour.
It has. Thank you. It went by so fast. And again, Damien, let us know if you want us to talk about the next one generation. We could do this weekly. There is just so many gold nuggets to be had in the HR space right now.
Absolutely great.
Thank you so much for the invite, and it's been a really wonderful session. I've learned a lot as well, so it's been great. Thanks.
Excellent. So now I will do the wave. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
See you later.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Yep. All good.